Zix 9447 stood before the massive data screen in the Galactic Anthropological Institute. The alien's long silver fingers moved across the holographic controls with practiced ease. For over 300 Earth years, Zix had studied primitive species across the galaxy. Most were boring. They fought for food, territory, and mates. Nothing special. Today was different. The Institute had discovered a new species on the outer rim of the galaxy. They called themselves humans. The preliminary reports were strange. These humans had somehow survived on their planet for thousands of years, but they never stopped fighting each other. Every few years, they started new wars. This makes no sense, Zix thought while reading the data. Most species learned to live in peace after reaching space travel, but humans kept fighting even after they built starships and colonized other planets. They were currently at war with a species called the Corvan Empire. The Corvan were reptile-like creatures. Zix had studied them 50 years ago. They were moderately intelligent and somewhat civilized. They expanded their territory slowly and logically. They followed basic survival rules that most species understood. But humans were different. They made choices that seemed to go against their own survival. The reports showed humans dying for other humans they barely knew. They shared resources with weaker members of their groups. They even helped their enemies sometimes. None of this made scientific sense. Zix's supervisor, High Researcher Velm 2903, appeared on the communication screen. His blue crystalline face showed no emotion, as was proper for their species. "You have read the preliminary data on the humans?" "Yes," Zix replied. "They appear to be highly aggressive but also self-destructive. They waste resources on members who contribute little to survival." "Exactly. The High Council wants a complete study. We need to understand why they have not destroyed themselves yet. Your mission is simple. Observe their military conflicts. Document their primitive behavior. Recommend quarantine protocols to keep them contained." Zix nodded. This was routine work. The Institute had quarantined dozens of species that were too violent or unpredictable to join the Galactic Collective. Humans would probably be another standard case. "I have arranged for you to observe from their military vessel called UHS Liberty. You will be invisible to their sensors. The ship is commanded by someone named Jake Morrison. They are heading to something called the Kepler sector for battle. How long should this study take?" Zix asked. "A few months at most. These primitive conflicts usually follow predictable patterns. Document their aggression, catalog their weapons, note their tactical mistakes, then return with your quarantine recommendation." The next day, Zix activated the observation pod and transferred to the human ship. The pod could not be detected by human technology. It attached to the hull like a small growth. From inside, Zix could see and hear everything that happened on the ship. The UHS Liberty was much smaller than collective ships. It looked crude and simple. The humans inside moved around quickly, always busy with some task. Their faces showed many different expressions. Zix had trouble understanding what these expressions meant. Captain Jake Morrison was a middle-aged human with dark hair and tired eyes. He stood on the bridge giving orders to his crew. Unlike collective officers who spoke in calm, logical tones, Morrison's voice carried something else. Emotion, perhaps. He seemed to care about his crew members as individuals. "Attention all hands," Morrison announced over the ship's communication system. "We're approaching the Kepler sector. Intelligence reports show heavy Corvan activity. This won't be easy, but remember why we're here. 3 human colonies in this sector need our protection. Families are counting on us to keep them safe." Zix made notes in the observation log. The captain was using emotional manipulation to motivate his crew. This was inefficient. Logical orders based on duty and survival should be enough. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez sat at the navigation station. She was young with short brown hair. Zix noticed she kept a small picture on her console. It showed her with 2 small humans, children probably. Rodriguez checked the picture frequently while working. "Incoming transmission from Admiral Brooks," McCam announced the communications officer. Emma Stone. She was blonde and spoke with confidence. Morrison nodded. "Put her through." A woman's face appeared on the main screen. She had gray hair and sharp eyes. "Jake, the situation is worse than we thought. Corvan forces have surrounded the New Hope transport ship. 3,000 civilians aboard, including families evacuating from Titan Colony." "Orders, Admiral?" Morrison asked. "You're the closest ship." But Jake, intelligence shows at least 6 Corvan heavy cruisers in the area. The Liberty can't take those odds. Six waited for Morrison's logical response. Any rational commander would request backup or suggest the civilians try to escape on their own. The tactical situation was clearly hopeless. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. His crew watched him carefully. Finally, he spoke. "Admiral, those are our people on that transport. We can't abandon them. Jake, I'm not ordering you to engage. This is your choice, then we're going in. Liberty out." Six stared at the data screen in confusion. Morrison had just chosen to risk his entire crew for civilians who were not even his family group. In collective society, only blood relatives or breeding partners deserved such sacrifice. These humans were strangers to Morrison. The crew immediately began preparing for battle. No one questioned the captain's decision. Zix noted this with interest. Either these humans were all related somehow, or they followed different social rules than any species the Institute had studied. Chief Engineer Pete Collins ran diagnostics on the ship's weapons. He was an older man with gray hair and rough hands. "Captain, I can give you full power to the main guns, but the shields will be at 60%. Do it, Pete, Amy. Plot a course that keeps us between the Corvins and the transport." "Aye, sir," Rodriguez replied. She looked at the picture of her children once more, then focused on her controls. As the Liberty approached the battle zone, Zix prepared to document what should be a short, brutal engagement. The humans would probably fight briefly, then retreat when they realized the situation was hopeless. This would provide excellent data on primitive aggression and self-preservation instincts. But something in the way the crew moved suggested this might be different. They worked together with unusual cooperation. They seemed calm despite approaching certain death. Most strange of all, they appeared to trust each other completely. Zix had observed many species in combat situations. Usually, individuals focused on their own survival when facing overwhelming odds. But these humans acted as if the group's survival was more important than their own lives. The observation sensors detected the first Corvin ships ahead. The battle was about to begin. Zix activated the recording systems and prepared to document another primitive species, destroying itself through illogical aggression. What the alien observer did not expect was to witness something that would challenge everything the Galactic Collective believed about civilization itself. The first Corvin dreadnought appeared on the Liberty's sensors like a massive shadow. It was 3 times larger than the human ship, with thick armor plating and dozens of weapon ports. Zix had seen similar ships before. The Corvin built them for pure destruction. 3 more ships decloaking, reported Emma Stone from communications. "We're looking at 4 heavy cruisers and 2 destroyers. Captain Morrison stood calmly at the center of the bridge. "All hands, battle stations. Pete, I need everything you can give me." "You got it, Captain," came the reply from engineering. Zix watched the tactical display with scientific interest. The humans were outnumbered 6 to 1. Their ship was smaller and less armored. By every logical calculation, they should retreat immediately. Yet Morrison ordered the ship forward, directly toward the enemy fleet. "Sir, the New Hope is signaling," Stone reported. "Captain Martinez says they're ready to make a run for it when we create an opening." "Tell them to stay put until I give the word," Morrison replied. "Amy, take us in fast and low. Use the asteroid field for cover." The Liberty dove between floating rocks and metal debris from previous battles. Corvin ships opened fire immediately. Bright energy beams cut through space, missing the human ship by meters. The Liberty shook as near misses sent shock waves through the hull. Zix noticed something unusual. Despite the danger, the human crew worked together perfectly. Each person knew exactly what to do without being told. They moved like parts of a single organism. At the weapons station, Lieutenant Carl Baker fired the main guns with precise timing. He was a young man with steady hands and calm eyes. Direct hit on the lead cruiser. "Minimal damage to their shields. Keep firing," Morrison ordered. "Make them focus on us." The plan became clear to Zix. Morrison was using his ship as bait. He wanted the Corvin fleet to chase the Liberty, instead of attacking the transport full of civilians. It was tactically sound, but it meant certain death for his crew. The Liberty took a direct hit from a Corvin energy cannon. The lights flickered and smoke filled the bridge. At the damage control station, Petty Officer Lisa Park calmly reported casualties. "Hull breach on Deck 7. Medical team responding. We've lost 2 crew members." Morrison nodded grimly. "Seal that section." "All power to engines and weapons," Zix made detailed notes. The humans showed no panic despite facing overwhelming odds. Their captain remained focused on protecting strangers rather than his own people. This violated every survival instinct that should govern an intelligent species. The battle intensified. A Corvin missile exploded near the Liberty's port side, causing massive damage. The ship listed badly, struggling to maintain course. In engineering, Chief Pete Collins worked frantically to keep the engines running. "Captain, I'm losing containment in the main reactor," Collins reported over the intercom. "I can hold it together for maybe 20 minutes. "Do what you can, Pete." Zix observed Collins through the internal sensors. The older man was working alone in a section that was flooding with radioactive coolant. He should evacuate immediately to save his own life. Instead, he stayed at his post, manually routing power to the weapon systems. "I'm not leaving," Collins said to himself, knowing no one else could hear. "These kids need to get home." On the bridge, Lieutenant Rodriguez noticed that 3 escape pods had been damaged in the attack. She quickly calculated that there weren't enough working pods for the entire crew. Without telling anyone, she quietly removed her name from the evacuation list and added 3 injured crew members instead. Zix watched this behavior with growing confusion. Rodriguez had children waiting for her at home. The alien had seen the picture on her console. Yet she chose to give up her chance of survival for crew members she barely knew. This made no logical sense. The Liberty managed to damage one of the smaller Corvin ships, but the enemy was closing in for the kill. Morrison made a desperate decision. "Emma, signal the New Hope. Tell them to run now. We'll keep the Corvins busy." "Sir, there's something else," Stone replied. "I'm picking up a distress signal. Corvin ship heavily damaged. They're asking for help." Morrison paused. The logical choice was to ignore the enemy request, but Zix watched the captain's face change as he considered the situation. "How many crew on that ship?" "Sensors show about 40 life signs. Their life support is failing." "Captain," Baker said from weapons, "it could be a trap." Morrison was quiet for several seconds. The bridge crew waited for his decision. Finally, he spoke. "Amy, change course." "Take us to the damaged Corvin ship." "Sir?" Rodriguez looked confused. "We're going to help them." Zix stared at the data display in shock. Morrison was risking his already damaged ship to save enemy soldiers. This behavior had no precedent in any of the Institute's records. It violated every rule of warfare and survival. The Liberty approached the crippled Corvin vessel. It was drifting powerless, with atmosphere leaking from multiple hull breaches. Morrison opened a communication channel. "Corvin ship, this is Captain Morrison of the UHS Liberty. We're here to assist." A reptilian face appeared on the screen. The alien looked surprised and suspicious. "You are human. Why do you offer help to your enemies?" Morrison shrugged. "Because you're in trouble, and we can help." The Corvin commander, who identified himself as Sub-General Thek, seemed genuinely confused by this response. "This makes no sense. We were trying to kill you moments ago. That was war. This is different." Dr. Alex Turner, the ship's medical officer, led a rescue team to the damaged Corvin ship. Zix watched as the human medic treated injured reptilian soldiers with the same care he would show his own crew. Turner worked for hours, moving from patient to patient without rest. "These beings were our enemies," Turner told his medical assistant, Nurse Kelly Wright. "But right now they're just hurt and scared. That's what matters." Wright nodded and continued treating a young Corvin soldier who had lost an arm in the battle. She spoke gently to the alien, even though it couldn't understand her language. Her tone seemed to calm the frightened creature. Zix recorded everything but struggled to understand the behavior patterns. Humans appeared to have 2 completely different modes of operation. In battle, they fought with deadly efficiency. But when the fighting stopped, they immediately switched to helping anyone who needed assistance, including former enemies. As the rescue continued, Communications Officer Stone received an urgent message. "Captain Admiral Brooks is signaling. The main Corvin fleet is regrouping. We need to leave now or we'll be trapped." Morrison looked at the Corvin survivors being brought aboard. "How many more, Doc?" 12 more wounded to transfer," Turner replied. "We don't have time," urged Lieutenant Baker. "Sir, we need to go." Morrison made another impossible decision. "We finish the rescue first. All power to shields." Sub-General Thek watched the humans risk their lives to save his crew. "Captain Morrison, why do you do this? Your own people will die if you stay here longer." Morrison met the alien's eyes. "Because it's the right thing to do." The phrase made no sense to Zix. Right was not a concept that appeared in any survival algorithm. Yet every human on the ship seemed to understand exactly what their captain meant. As the Liberty finally escaped with both human and Corvan survivors aboard, Zix realized that something fundamental had changed in the alien observer's understanding. These humans operated according to rules that had nothing to do with survival or logic. They followed something they called morality. And for the first time in centuries of research, Zix was beginning to wonder if the Galactic Collective had been wrong about what it meant to be truly civilized. 3 weeks after the rescue mission, the war took a terrible turn. Zix listened to the emergency broadcast from New Terra Colony with growing alarm. The planet was home to 12 million humans, mostly families and civilians who had never been involved in the fighting. "This is Governor Patricia Wells of New Terra." The woman's voice crackled through space. "Corvan forces have surrounded our planet. They're demanding complete surrender. Anyone who resists will be killed." Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of the Liberty, his face grim. The ship had been repaired after the last battle, but it was still no match for an entire Corvan fleet. Around him, his crew listened to the transmission in silence. Admiral Brooks appeared on the communication screen. Her usual confidence was gone. "Jake, I'm not going to lie to you. We have maybe 50 ships in the sector. Intelligence reports show the Corvans have over 200 vessels around New Terra. They're planning to destroy every human settlement on the planet." "What are our orders?" Morrison asked. "Officially, I can't order anyone to attack those odds. It would be suicide." Morrison nodded slowly. "And unofficially?" Brooks was quiet for a long moment. "Those are our people down there, Jake, families, children. If we don't try to help them, who will?" Zix expected Morrison to request immediate evacuation for his crew. Any logical commander would recognize an impossible situation and withdraw. The humans had done their duty by fighting as long as they could. No one would blame them for retreating now. Instead, Morrison turned to his crew. "You heard the Admiral. This is volunteer only. Anyone who wants to transfer to a ship heading away from the battle, speak up now. No shame in choosing to live." The bridge was completely silent. Lieutenant Rodriguez looked at the picture of her children, then back at her captain. "With respect, sir, where would we go? If New Terra falls, every human colony is at risk. This is where we make our stand." Chief Collins spoke up from engineering. "Captain, I've got grandchildren on New Terra. Even if I wanted to run, I couldn't live with myself." One by one, every crew member on the Liberty volunteered to stay. Zix documented this behavior with amazement. These humans were choosing almost certain death to protect strangers they had never met. The human fleet gathered near the edge of the New Terra system. 50 ships against 200. But as Zix watched, more vessels arrived. Cargo haulers with welded-on weapons, passenger ships carrying volunteer fighters, even old mining ships with improvised missile launchers. An elderly man named Frank Murphy commanded one of the cargo vessels. He was 70 years old and should have been retired. Instead, he had gathered a crew of volunteers and converted his freight hauler into a makeshift warship. "This old girl wasn't built for fighting," Murphy told his crew over the radio, "but she's carried supplies to every human colony for 30 years. If New Terra falls, none of those colonies will be safe, so we do what we can." Admiral Brooks tried to coordinate the mismatched fleet. "All ships, this is Brooks. I know our odds aren't good, but remember what we're fighting for. Every person on New Terra is counting on us." The battle began at dawn, New Terra time. Corvan ships emerged from behind the planet's moons like a dark cloud. Their formation was perfect, their weapons charged and ready. They had planned this attack for months. The human fleet charged forward without hesitation. Zix watched through the sensors as Captain Morrison led the Liberty directly toward the largest Corvan dreadnought. Behind him, civilian ships followed military vessels into battle. "All power to forward guns," Morrison ordered. "Amy, get us close enough to hurt them." The space around New Terra became a storm of energy beams and explosions. Human ships darted between the larger Corvan vessels, using speed and desperation to even the odds. Many were destroyed in the first few minutes of fighting. Frank Murphy's cargo ship took a direct hit that destroyed its main engine. Instead of retreating, the old man rammed his vessel into a Corvan destroyer. Both ships exploded in a brilliant flash. Murphy's last transmission was simple: "Tell my family I did my job." On the planet's surface, human colonists prepared for invasion. But instead of fleeing, they organized defenses. Teachers became soldiers. Doctors set up field hospitals. Even children helped by carrying supplies and messages. In the orbital defense stations around New Terra, small teams of humans held impossible positions. Communications specialist Danny Lopez coordinated evacuation ships from Station 7, even as Corvin boarding parties fought their way through the corridors outside his control room. Station 7 to all evacuation ships, Lopez broadcast calmly. Docking Bay 3 is clear. Repeat, Bay 3 is safe for landing. His assistant, a young woman named Helen Price, looked at the security monitors. Danny, they're almost through the door. We need to leave now. Lopez shook his head. There are still people on the planet who need these coordinates. I'm staying. I'm not leaving you here alone. Helen, you've got a husband and baby waiting for Hugo. My family would never forgive me for abandoning a friend. Price sat down at a secondary console and continued helping. Coordinate rescues. Zix watched the battle with growing fascination. The humans were losing, but they kept fighting. More importantly, they continued helping each other and protecting civilians even while facing certain death. Dr. Alex Turner had set up a medical station on one of the orbital platforms. Wounded from both human and Corvin ships were brought to him for treatment. Turner worked without rest, his hands steady despite the explosions shaking the station. Nurse Kelly Wright assisted him, moving between patients with calm efficiency. When a group of injured Corvin prisoners arrived, she treated them with the same care as human soldiers. Doctor, shouldn't we focus on our own people first? Asked a young medical assistant. Turner looked up from a wounded Corvin soldier. Pain doesn't have a nationality, son. Neither does the oath I took to help anyone who needs it. The battle raged for hours. Human ships continued to arrive, reinforcements from distant colonies who had heard the call for help. They came knowing they would probably die, but unable to stand by while their fellow humans faced destruction. Captain Morrison's Liberty was badly damaged but still fighting. Half the crew was wounded, including Morrison himself. Blood ran down his face from a head injury, but he remained at his post. Sir, we've lost main power, reported Chief Collins. I can give you weapons or shields, but not both. Weapons, Morrison replied without hesitation. If we're going down, we take some of them with us. Lieutenant Rodriguez plotted a collision course with the nearest Corvin ship. Captain, if we ram them at full speed, it might take out their bridge. Morrison nodded. Amy, it's been an honor serving with you. Same here, sir. See you on the other side. But before the Liberty could complete its suicide run, something unexpected happened. Subgeneral Thek, the Corvin commander that Morrison had rescued weeks earlier, broadcast on an open channel. All Corvin ships. This is Thek. Cease firing immediately. The Corvin fleet slowed its attack, confused by the order from one of their own commanders. General Thek, you are not in command here, came an angry reply from the lead dreadnought. No, but I know these humans. They saved my crew when they could have left us to die. They fight not for conquest, but to protect their families. There is honor in this. Zix listened with amazement as Sub-General Thek convinced other Corvin commanders to withdraw from the battle. The reptilian officer had been changed by his experience with human compassion. As Corvin ships began pulling back from New Terra, Admiral Brooks broadcasted to the human fleet. All ships, hold your fire. It appears we have an unexpected ally. The Battle of New Terra ended not with destruction, but with an act of mercy from a former enemy who had learned what it meant to be human. Zix realized that this small group of humans had accomplished something the Galactic Collective thought impossible. They had changed the hearts and minds of their enemies through their actions. The alien observer began to understand that human warfare was unlike anything else in the galaxy. They didn't fight to destroy their enemies, but to protect what they loved. And sometimes that protection was so fierce and pure that it transformed everyone it touched. After the Battle of New Terra, Zix found itself experiencing something completely new. For 300 years, the alien had observed countless species with cold, scientific detachment. But watching humans sacrifice themselves for others had created strange reactions in Zix's consciousness. The alien tried to analyze these new feelings using standard research methods. When Nurse Kelly Wright worked 18 hours straight treating wounded soldiers, Zix recorded the behavior as inefficient resource allocation. But privately, the observer felt something that might be called admiration. Captain Morrison's ship, the Liberty, limped to a temporary base on New Terra's largest moon. The battle had left the vessel heavily damaged and half the crew injured. Zix watched through sensors as the humans helped each other with remarkable patience and care. Chief Engineer Pete Collins had been badly hurt during the fighting. His left arm was broken and he had burns across his back. But when young engineering technician Bobby Chen struggled with a complex repair, Collins dragged himself from his hospital bed to help. "Sir, you should be resting," Chen said, worried about the older man. Collins shook his head. "This ship kept us alive, son. Now it's our turn to take care of her." Zix observed this interaction with growing confusion. Collins gained nothing by helping Chen. The repair work could wait until the chief engineer recovered. Yet Collins seemed unable to rest while his crew struggled with difficult tasks. Similar scenes played out throughout the ship. Lieutenant Rodriguez, despite being exhausted from the battle, spent her off-duty time writing letters to the families of crew members who had died. She didn't have to do this, it wasn't part of her official duties. But she felt responsible for making sure those families knew how bravely their loved ones had fought. Dr. Turner worked around the clock in the makeshift hospital set up in the ship's cargo bay. Human and Corvin wounded lay side by side, receiving equal treatment. When supplies ran low, Turner gave his own rations to patients who needed extra nutrition to heal. "Doctor, you haven't eaten in 2 days," Nurse Wright pointed out during a brief break between surgeries. Turner looked at the wounded filling the cargo bay. "These people need the food more than I do. I can wait." Zix tried to understand this behavior using scientific models. In collective society, individuals helped others only when it benefited themselves or their immediate family group. But humans seemed to help anyone who needed assistance regardless of personal cost. The transformation in Zix's thinking accelerated when the alien witnessed events on New Terra's surface. The planet had been badly damaged during the battle, with cities in ruins and millions of people homeless. Instead of focusing on their own survival, humans immediately began helping their neighbors. Tony Garcia, a civilian pilot who had fought in the space battle, organized relief flights to isolated settlements. His ship was damaged and fuel was scarce, but Garcia continued flying supplies to communities that would otherwise starve. "Why do you risk your life for these people?" asked Maria Santos, a supply officer who helped load Garcia's ship. Garcia shrugged. "Because someone has to. My family is safe in the capital. These folks have nobody else." Zix watched Garcia crash land his overloaded transport near a mountain village whose emergency beacon had been broadcasting for days. The pilot was badly injured in the crash, but his cargo of medical supplies saved dozens of lives. Local villagers carried Garcia to their small clinic and cared for him like family, even though they had never met him before. This pattern repeated across the planet. Humans helping strangers, sharing scarce resources, risking their lives for people they didn't know. It defied every evolutionary model in the collective's databases. The alien observer began to experience what humans might call emotional involvement. When Zix watched a recording of Frank Murphy's cargo ship ramming the Corvin destroyer, something shifted in the observer's consciousness. The old man's sacrifice had saved hundreds of lives on the planet below. His choice to die for others created unprecedented neural responses in Zix's brain. This development disturbed the alien deeply. Fourth-hand researchers were trained to maintain clinical detachment from their subjects. Emotional involvement was considered a serious flaw that compromised scientific objectivity. Yet Zix found it increasingly difficult to observe human behavior without caring about the outcomes. The turning point came during a rescue mission to a damaged research station orbiting New Terra. The station had been hit by debris during the battle and was slowly losing atmosphere. 15 human scientists were trapped inside, running out of air. Captain Morrison volunteered the Liberty for the rescue mission, despite his ship's damaged condition. The approach was dangerous. Floating wreckage made navigation extremely hazardous, and the station's orbit was decaying rapidly. Zix's observation pod was attached to the Liberty's hull, hidden from human sensors but vulnerable to the same dangers facing the ship. When a piece of debris struck the pod's outer shell, critical systems began failing. For the first time in centuries of research, Zix faced personal danger. The pod's life support was damaged and its stealth generators were offline. The alien would have to reveal itself to the humans or die when the pod's remaining air ran out. Standard procedure required Zix to activate an emergency beacon and wait for extraction by a collective rescue ship, but that would take days and the alien's air supply would last only hours. The only immediate help available came from the humans Zix was supposed to be studying. The alien made an impossible decision. Zix activated the pod's distress signal and transmitted it on human emergency frequencies. Within minutes, Captain Morrison's voice crackled through the communication system. Unknown vessel. This is the UHS Liberty. We're receiving your distress signal. Are you in immediate danger? Zix hesitated. Revealing the observation mission would violate every Institute protocol. But the alternative was death. This is a research vessel. My life support is failing. I need assistance. Copy that. We're coming to get you. Morrison ordered Lieutenant Rodriguez to plot an intercept course. The Liberty, already damaged and struggling, changed course to help another being in distress. Zix realized that Morrison was risking his crew's safety for a complete stranger. The rescue was dangerous. Chief Collins had to manually override safety protocols to get close enough to the damaged pod. Technician Chen spacewalked across the gap between ships, carrying emergency patches and breathing equipment. When Chen opened the pod's outer hatch, he found himself face to face with an alien creature unlike anything in human records. Zix was tall and thin, with silver skin and large, dark eyes. The being clearly wasn't human. Chen stared for a moment, then activated his radio. Captain, you're not going to believe this. Morrison's voice came back immediately. Doesn't matter what they look like, Bobby. Are they alive? Yes, sir. But barely. Then get them aboard. We'll sort out the details later. Zix was carried to the Liberty's medical bay where Dr. Turner began emergency treatment. The alien's biology was completely foreign to human medicine, but Turner worked carefully to stabilize vital signs and provide oxygen compatible with Zix's respiratory system. What are you? Turner asked as he worked. Zix had prepared for this moment. I am a researcher from the Galactic Collective. I was studying your species. Studying us for what? The truth seemed inadequate, but Zix couldn't lie to the beings who had saved the alien's life. To determine if humanity should be quarantined from the rest of galactic civilization. Turner paused in his medical work. And what's your conclusion? Zix looked around the medical bay. Human crew members were caring for Corvin prisoners alongside their own wounded. No one seemed concerned that they were treating their former enemies. Morrison had risked his ship to save 15 scientists he didn't know, and then risked it again to rescue a spy from another species. I believe, Zix said slowly, that the collective has been wrong about what it means to be civilized. Dr. Turner smiled. Well, that's a start. As Zix recovered in the Liberty's medical bay, the alien experienced something unprecedented in 3 centuries of research. For the first time, Zix cared about the beings being studied. The humans had become more than research subjects. They had become friends. This realization terrified and thrilled Zix in equal measure. The alien had been fundamentally changed by exposure to human compassion and sacrifice. There would be no going back to the cold detachment of before. Zix began to understand that the humans' greatest strength wasn't their weapons or their tactics. It was their refusal to let war destroy their humanity. They fought not because they enjoyed violence, but because they were willing to die to protect what they loved. And sometimes, that love was powerful enough to transform even the most unlikely observers into something new. 6 months after the Battle of New Terra, Zix stood once again before the massive data screens of the Galactic Anthropological Institute. The alien's appearance had changed during the long journey home. The silver skin seemed somehow warmer, and the large dark eyes held emotions that had never been there before. High Researcher Veln 2903 waited impatiently for the report. His crystalline features showed the cold logic that Zix remembered from their last meeting. You have been gone longer than expected. The High Council is eager to read your quarantine recommendations for the human species. Zix looked at the datapad containing the report. Months of careful writing had gone into the document. Every word had been chosen with precision. The alien knew that this report would determine humanity's future in the galaxy. The humans present unique challenges to our understanding of civilized behavior. Zix began carefully. Veln nodded with satisfaction. As expected, primitive aggression is always difficult to categorize properly. What quarantine protocols do you recommend? I do not recommend quarantine. The silence in the chamber was complete. Veln's crystalline face shifted through several colors, a sign of extreme emotional disturbance in his species. Explain yourself, Veln said coldly. Zix activated the data display and began presenting findings that challenged every assumption the collective held about warfare and civilization. Images of human sacrifice and compassion filled the screens. Audio recordings of soldiers choosing to die for strangers played through the chamber's speakers. Humans engage in warfare not for conquest or resources, but to protect others. They consistently choose group survival over individual survival. Most remarkably, they extend this protection to beings who are not genetically related to them. Impossible, Felon interrupted. No species evolves such behaviors. Individual survival always takes priority. I have extensive documentation. Human soldiers share resources with wounded enemies. Medical personnel treat all injured beings equally, regardless of species. Leaders risk their lives to protect civilians they have never met. Zix showed video recordings from the Liberty's medical bay, where Dr. Turner and Nurse Wright had treated Corvin prisoners with the same care given to human crew members. The alien played audio of Captain Morrison choosing to rescue the damaged research station despite the danger to his own ship. Furthermore, Zix continued, humans appear to use compassion as a weapon. Their willingness to help enemies has converted several Corvin commanders to their cause. They are winning the war not through superior firepower, but by changing their enemies' hearts and minds. Velm studied the data with growing alarm. This behavior is clearly the result of genetic defects or mental illness. The humans cannot be functioning normally. On the contrary, they are remarkably efficient. Human units show incredible coordination and loyalty. Their willingness to sacrifice for others creates unbreakable bonds between individuals. They fight harder and more effectively than any species in our records because they are fighting for something greater than themselves. The presentation continued for hours. Zix showed examples of human innovation, creativity, and problem-solving ability. The alien presented evidence that human irrationality was actually a form of advanced social evolution that made their civilization incredibly strong and adaptable. Most significantly, Zix concluded, humans possess something we lack, the ability to inspire others to become better than they were. During my observation period, I witnessed Corvin soldiers abandon their own military to protect human civilians. Former enemies became allies through exposure to human compassion. Velen reviewed the data with obvious distress. Your conclusions are contaminated by excessive exposure to the subjects. This report is scientifically invalid. I anticipated this response, Zix replied calmly. I request that the High Council review the evidence independently. The following day, Zix presented the findings to the full High Council of the Galactic Collective. 12 ancient beings from different species listened in silence as the alien researcher challenged everything they believed about civilization and evolution. Council Leader Quan 8851, a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline matrix, spoke for the group. These findings are disturbing. If accurate, they suggest that our entire understanding of social development may be flawed. The humans have weaponized altruism, Zix explained. They have turned what we consider evolutionary weakness into their greatest strength. They don't conquer enemies. They convert them through acts of mercy and sacrifice. Impossible, declared Council Member Vren 5542, whose species had achieved civilization through ruthless competition. Compassion is a luxury that weak species indulge in before extinction. Zix displayed recordings of the Liberty's crew sharing their rations with Corvin prisoners. These weak beings defeated a numerically superior enemy force through tactics we've never seen before. They protected civilians while engaging in combat. They rescued wounded enemies in the middle of battle. And they won. The debate continued for days. Some council members insisted that the human behavior was an aberration that would lead to their eventual destruction. Others worried that Zix's findings suggested fundamental flaws in collective social theory. Finally, Council Leader Quan called for a vote. We must decide whether to accept researcher Zix 9447's conclusions or to reject them as contaminated data. The vote was closer than Zix had expected. 7 council members voted to reject the findings and proceed with standard quarantine protocols. 5 voted to accept the research and establish formal contact with humanity. The motion fails, Quan announced. Researcher Zix 9447, you will report to the reconditioning facility for memory adjustment and reassignment. These aberrant emotional responses must be corrected. Zix had prepared for this possibility. I respectfully decline reconditioning. The silence in the chamber was profound. No researcher had ever refused a direct order from the High Council. You understand the consequences of this refusal? Quan asked. Exile from the collective, loss of all research privileges and support, permanent separation from my species. Zix paused, remembering Captain Morrison's words during the battle. Yes, I understand. But some things are more important than personal comfort. Veln stepped forward angrily. You have been contaminated by exposure to these primitive humans. You no longer think logically. Perhaps, Zix admitted. But I have learned something that pure logic cannot teach. I have learned what it means to care about others more than yourself. The humans call it conscience, and it has made me more than I was before. 3 days later, Zix stood on the bridge of a human transport ship heading back toward the war zone. Captain Morrison had personally authorized the aliens' passage when he learned about the collective's decision. You could have stayed safe in your own space, Morrison said as they traveled through hyperspace. Why come back to us? Zix looked at the stars streaming past the view screen. Because this is where I belong now. My people see the universe as a place of logic and cold calculation, but you have shown me that it can be something more. A place where different beings help each other become better than they ever imagined possible. The transport arrived at a refugee camp on the edge of human space. Thousands of beings from a dozen different species lived there. Humans, Corvins, and others displaced by the ongoing war. Zix volunteered to work in the medical tent alongside Dr. Rachel Turner, a young physician who reminded the alien of the compassionate humans on the Liberty. It's strange, Turner said as they treated patients together. 6 months ago, we were enemies with half these species. Now we're all working together to build something better. Zix nodded, understanding finally what had been missing from the collective's advanced civilization. Humans don't just study other species, the alien realized. You inspire them to become more than they were. You don't conquer the galaxy, you heal it. As night fell over the refugee camp, Zix sat down to write a final report. This one would not be submitted to the Galactic Collective. Instead, it would be shared with human leaders as they prepared for first official contact with other galactic civilizations. To the leaders of humanity, Zix wrote, You possess something unique in this galaxy, the ability to see potential in others and help them achieve it. This gift will serve you well as you take your place among the stars. The universe has been waiting for someone like you, though it may not have realized it. The alien paused, looking up at the unfamiliar constellations visible from this part of space. Somewhere among those stars, the Galactic Collective continued its cold, logical expansion across the galaxy. But here, in this small refugee camp, a different kind of civilization was being born. It was messy and imperfect. Humans still argued with each other and made mistakes, but they also forgave each other and tried to do better tomorrow. They saw enemies as potential friends and strangers as family they hadn't met yet. Zix had been sent to study humanity at war and had expected to catalog another species' primitive aggression. Instead, the alien had discovered that true strength wasn't the absence of weakness, but the courage to be vulnerable for others. Humans didn't fight because they were savage. They fought because they were the most civilized beings in the galaxy, and civilization was worth defending.